Have you ever noticed some people fall apart when life hits them hard, while others somehow quietly rise? They lose, they hurt, they fail, and yet they find a way to smile again, not because life is easy, but because they see it differently. That difference is optimism. But not the fake kind, not the everything's fine mask. I'm talking about the real, powerful kind, the kind that helps you stand when everything else falls. In this world where bad news spreads faster than hope, where everyone tells you what's wrong with life, Alan Loy McGuinness reminds us what's still right about it. He says optimism isn't about ignoring pain, it's about believing pain can be transformed. The truth is, you don't need to be born positive. You just need to practice seeing light in dark places, because every time you choose hope instead of fear, you grow a little stronger. Every time you forgive instead of hate, you heal a little faster. And every time you let go instead of holding on, you move closer to peace. So tonight, take a deep breath. Let's explore how optimism can change not just your mood, but your entire way of living. Because this isn't a story about pretending to be happy. It's about discovering a quiet power inside you, a power that whispers, no matter what happens, I'll find a way. What optimism really means. Optimism is not about pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's not about forcing a smile or ignoring pain. True optimism is the decision to believe that no matter how dark it gets, there's still a way forward. Alan Loy McGuinness explains that optimistic people aren't naive dreamers. They're realists with hope. They see the same problems everyone else sees, but they choose to focus on what can be done, not what's already lost. The book opens by reminding us, we live in a world where love ends, people betray, and sickness happens. Yet the ones who endure these storms with strength share one mindset. They refuse to get stuck in despair. Optimism doesn't deny pain. It transforms it. It says, yes, this hurts, but I can grow through it. McGuinness shows that optimism is not a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill you can learn. It's the ability to think, I can handle this, even when life seems impossible. He compares unrealistic Pollyanna positivity, which denies reality, to what he calls practical optimism. A practical optimist faces the facts, prepares for challenges, and still believes something good can come out of them. Throughout the book, you'll meet people who turned loss into learning, fear into focus, and failure into a second chance. They didn't avoid hardship. They mastered how to move through it. That's what real optimism is, not the absence of pain, but the presence of courage. The traits of resilient optimists. What makes some people rise again when everything around them collapses? Why do certain individuals seem to bend under pressure but never break? Alan Loy McGuinness calls them resilient optimists, people who live with both hope and realism. They aren't lucky and they aren't blind to pain. They've simply built a set of mental habits that help them stay balanced no matter what happens. In the book, he outlines 12 core traits that define these people, and they're not supernatural gifts, they're learnable. Let's look at what they mean. They don't freeze when problems appear. Instead of asking, why me? They ask, what now? When challenges hit, they respond, not retreat. They look for partial solutions. They know life rarely gives full answers, even small progress counts. They believe they can influence their future. Luck plays a role, but attitude and effort shape destiny far more. They allow renewal, they rest, reset, and return stronger. Optimism isn't non-stop activity, it's sustainable energy. They guard their thoughts. They don't let negativity spiral out of control. They interrupt destructive thinking before it takes root. They develop perspective. They recognize that bad days don't define them or their whole story. They imagine success first. Visualization isn't fantasy, it's mental rehearsal for victory. They choose joy, not just happiness. Happiness depends on circumstance. Joy comes from meaning. They know how to relax. Calm minds create clear decisions. Optimists value peace, not constant action. They fill their lives with love. Love in friendships, family, or faith becomes emotional fuel against despair. They share good news. They talk about hope, not fear, and that hope spreads to others. They accept what can't be changed. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. McGuinness shows that these 12 habits can be learned through reflection and small daily choices. Optimism isn't built overnight, it's trained like a muscle. And every time you choose hope over fear, that muscle grows stronger. As he writes, Optimism is not about pretending everything's fine, it's about believing you can find a way, even when it's not. How optimism shapes life outcomes. Have you ever noticed how two people can live through the same hardship, yet end up completely different? One becomes bitter and hopeless, the other somehow becomes wiser, stronger, more alive. Alan Loy McGuinness says the difference lies in mindset, not luck, not intelligence, not privilege, but the way they interpret what happens. Optimists and pessimists live in the same world, but they see two entirely different realities. When a pessimist fails, they think I'm not good enough. When an optimist fails, they think, that didn't work, let's try something else. That single shift in perspective changes everything. Optimism and success. Modern psychology, especially through the work of Martin Seligman, has proven that optimism doesn't just feel better, it works better. Optimistic people perform higher in school, recover faster from illness, earn more over time, and often live longer. Why? Because they believe their actions matter. That belief makes them act. Action creates opportunity, and opportunity leads to success. In short, optimism is not the result of success, it's the cause of it. Optimism and health science backs this up too. Optimistic people experience lower stress levels, stronger immune systems, and faster recovery after surgery. It's not magic, it's biology. When you expect good things, your brain releases chemicals that support healing and focus rather than fear and fatigue. Optimism and relationships. Optimists also build stronger connections. They forgive faster, trust more easily, and communicate with empathy. They don't waste energy replaying anger. They use that energy to rebuild. Their relationships last longer, not because they avoid conflict, but because they believe problems can be solved. The cycle of hope. McGuinness calls optimism a self-reinforcing loop. When you think positively, you act with confidence. When you act with confidence, you get results. And results confirm your belief that effort pays off, feeding the next cycle of hope. That's how ordinary people turn challenges into victories. Optimism isn't about being lucky, it's about being ready to see the chance hidden inside the challenge. Facing reality without losing hope. There's a common misunderstanding about optimism, that it means denying pain, ignoring problems, or pretending everything's okay. But Alan Loy McGuinness makes it clear, true optimism begins with reality. To be optimistic doesn't mean closing your eyes to suffering. It means opening them wide and still saying, I can face this. He calls this realistic optimism, the ability to see life as it is, without letting despair take control. The Churchill lesson. McGuinness uses a powerful story, Winston Churchill. In 1940, when Britain stood on the edge of collapse, Churchill didn't stand before his nation and say, everything will be fine. He said, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. That's not denial, that's courage. And still hidden in his words was a fierce belief that they would overcome. He blended truth with hope, and that's what saved a nation. Optimists like Churchill don't pretend the storm isn't coming, they prepare for it, and while others run for shelter, they lead through it. Method 1. See yourself as a problem solver. When things go wrong, many people freeze. They see the problem as proof of failure. Optimists see it as a puzzle to solve. McGuinness tells a story about a young writer who faced rejection after rejection from publishers. While he wanted to quit, his optimistic friend said, now the fun begins. Let's find another way. That attitude didn't erase the problem. It activated creativity. Soon, they found success through persistence, not luck. Optimists define themselves not by what happens to them, but by how they respond. Method 2. Keep multiple options open. Optimists rarely say, this is my only shot. They know life offers many routes to one destination. If one door closes, they start knocking on the next. McGuinness compares them to athletes adjusting mid-game, constantly scanning for openings, always ready to adapt. That flexibility turns setbacks into strategy. Method 3. Anticipate problems early. Being optimistic doesn't mean being careless. The best optimists are also cautious planners. They ask, what could go wrong, and how can I be ready for it? He gives the true story of Dr. Frances Kelsey, an FDA scientist who refused to approve a new drug in the 1960s despite heavy pressure. Her careful skepticism prevented one of the biggest medical disasters in history. That wasn't pessimism, it was wise optimism, believing in good outcomes while protecting against the bad. Method 4. Talk about your pain. Suppressing pain doesn't make it disappear. It makes it grow. McGinnis tells the story of a dying woman who said, "I'm not afraid to die. I just can't bear the pain my family feels." He reminded her that sorrow is not weakness. It's love's proof. Optimists don't run from sadness. They face it, speak it, and let it pass through. Tears, he writes, are not a failure of strength. They're a release valve for the soul. Method 5. Search for the good in the bad. One of McGinnis's most touching examples is from C.S. Lewis. After losing his wife to cancer, Lewis was broken, even angry at God. Yet instead of hiding his grief, he wrote about it. That book, A Grief Observed, helped millions find healing in loss. Lewis turned pain into purpose. That's the essence of mature optimism. Method 6. Avoid shallow positivity. Cheer-up speeches and fake smiles don't build strength. They break trust. Real encouragement sounds more like, "This hurts, it's unfair, but we can still take one small step." True optimism doesn't lie, it leads. McGinnis ends this part with a truth that echoes throughout the book. There are no hopeless situations, only people who have stopped believing in solutions. Optimism isn't pretending the fire isn't there. It's learning how to walk through it without losing your light. Problem-solving mindset. Optimists are not people who avoid problems, they are people who engage with them. Alan Loy McGinnis calls them people of action. When something goes wrong, they don't wait for rescue. They roll up their sleeves and start working, even if they don't know the full solution yet. He says optimists don't need the whole map, they just need the courage to take the next step. The power of small solutions. McGinnis reminds us that even partial progress is powerful. When we focus on solving a small part of a big problem, we break the cycle of helplessness. Henry Ford once said, "Nothing is particularly hard if you divide it into small tasks." That's exactly how optimists think. They don't say, "I'll fix my life." They say, "Today I'll fix this one thing." And by stacking small victories, they build real change. The story of the single mother. A young widow came to McGinnis completely overwhelmed. Her husband had left, her job was failing, and her relationship with her children was collapsing. She said, "Everything in my life is falling apart. I'm hopeless." McGinnis didn't give her empty comfort. He helped her make one clear moral decision to end a toxic relationship that drained her energy. It wasn't a grand solution, but it was a start. That small act of self-respect set off a chain reaction. She took night classes, found a better job, met someone kind, and built a new life. Her transformation didn't begin with luck. It began with one honest choice in the middle of chaos. Do the possible, leave the impossible. McGinnis quotes a wise teacher who told his student, "Let God handle the impossible. You focus on the possible." That's the secret of the problem-solving mindset. When you act on what's within your reach, momentum builds. And that movement, however small, awakens hope. Even in therapy, McGinnis says that when patients finally call for help or show up to a session, their healing has already begun. Taking action, any action, breaks the spell of despair, escaping the trap of perfection. Many people fail to start because they're waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect plan. But perfectionism kills progress. McGinnis cites research showing that perfectionists often earn less and achieve less because they spend too much time avoiding mistakes. Optimists don't fear failure. They know that every failed attempt brings them closer to a working one. Thomas Edison once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work." Failure isn't a stop sign. It's a feedback system. The ancient lesson of courage. McGinnis draws from the story of Moses sending 12 scouts to explore the Promised Land. 10 came back afraid, saying the land was full of giants. 2, named Caleb and Joshua, said, "Yes, the giants are real, but we can still win." The majority chose fear, and they wandered lost for years. Only the 2 optimists ever reached the Promised Land. The message is timeless. Fear sees the obstacle. Faith sees the opportunity. The rabbi and the baseball player. A man once told a wise rabbi, "I fail at most of what I try." The rabbi sent him to look up baseball statistics. The greatest hitter, Ty Cobb, succeeded only 3 times out of 10. The rabbi smiled and said, "If the best fail 7 out of 10 times, you're doing just fine." Optimists understand this truth. Success isn't the absence of failure. It's the refusal to quit after failure. The man who thought he was too optimistic. McGuinness tells of a man who approached him after a talk and said, "I've been too optimistic all my life. Trusting people has only gotten me hurt." But as they talked, the truth came out. His optimism had died the day his marriage collapsed. He wasn't too optimistic. He was afraid to hope again. Through small steps, therapy, accountability, and rebuilding faith, he restored both his family and his career. Not by avoiding pain, but by facing it with courage. In the end, McGuinness sums it up simply: optimists are not people who have fewer problems. They're people who solve more of them. The problem-solving mindset isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about believing that answers exist and daring to look for them. Taking responsibility for the future. Most people spend their lives reacting to what happens to them, but the people who actually shape their destiny, the resilient optimists, do something different. They take responsibility for their future. Alan Loy McGuinness explains that pessimists believe life happens to them. Optimists believe life happens through them. That single belief changes everything. The core belief of optimists: I may not control everything, but I can control how I respond. This mindset is the foundation of mental strength. When you believe you have no control, your energy fades. When you believe your actions matter, motivation returns. McGuinness often met patients who said, "What's the point? Nothing I do makes a difference." They weren't lazy, they were defeated. They had learned to be helpless. Psychologist Martin Seligman called this phenomenon learned helplessness. When people repeatedly experience pain or failure they can't escape, they begin to believe they have no power, even when freedom or opportunity finally appears. Optimists, however, learn the opposite: learned hopefulness. They teach their brains through experience that action leads to change. From victim to actor, McGuinness writes that pessimists live as victims of circumstance, blaming luck, fate, or other people. Optimists see themselves as actors in their own story. They don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "What can I do with what's happening?" That simple question shifts life from chaos to clarity. The Roosevelt example. Franklin D. Roosevelt, paralyzed by polio, could have easily withdrawn from public life. Instead, he used his illness as fuel for empathy and discipline. When people asked how he endured so much work despite his disability, he said, "You're looking at a man who spent 2 years learning to move one toe. His progress was slow, but his mindset was unstoppable. Each inch forward was proof that control was possible." Therapists as dealers of hope. McGuinness quotes psychiatrist Dr. Jerome Frank, who said that every good therapist must be a dealer of hope. Because hope, at its core, is not about luck. It's about agency, the belief that your choices matter. When people realize that their own behavior can change outcomes, even in small ways, their depression begins to lift. They stop waiting for someone to save them and start acting for themselves. The power of small victories. McGuinness tells a story of a depressed musician whose car broke down. At first, he just stared at the flat tire, frozen. Then, after years of avoiding challenges, he decided to try changing it himself. It took an hour, but he did it. That small act of competence broke his despair. It reminded him that he still had power, that not everything was beyond his control. McGuinness writes, "It wasn't the tire that changed, it was the man." When people experience even a small success after feeling powerless, something reawakens inside them. They start to believe, "Maybe I can handle more than I thought." A mother's lesson. McGuinness cites Jack Welch, the legendary CEO of General Electric, who led one of the world's biggest companies with a simple set of rules. Face reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. Change before you have to. Control your destiny, or someone else will. Welch often said he learned this mindset not in boardrooms but from his parents, especially his mother, who taught him accountability from a young age. She never let him hide behind excuses. That's how responsibility is built, one honest choice at a time. Why control creates freedom. It sounds ironic, but it's true. Taking responsibility actually sets you free. When you stop blaming, you start creating. When you stop waiting, you start moving. And when you accept that the future is partly in your hands, life feels lighter, not heavier. Because hope grows where control returns. McGuinness ends this section with a reminder that feels timeless. The happiest people are not those who have the easiest lives, but those who believe they can do something about the life they have. transforming energy and motivation. Where does energy come from? Why do some people seem to wake up ready for life while others drag themselves through the day? Alan Loy McGuinness says energy isn't just physical, it's emotional and spiritual. It comes from purpose, hope, and momentum. Optimists know how to generate energy even when they feel drained. Their secret? They feed their minds with thoughts that strengthen them, not those that weaken them. Energy follows focus. McGuinness explains that whatever you focus on expands. If you focus on fear, fear grows. If you focus on what's possible, your energy multiplies. Optimists choose to direct their attention toward what gives life, not what takes it. They practice what he calls selective attention, the discipline of choosing your thoughts as carefully as you choose your friends. When you consciously decide to notice progress, beauty, or gratitude, your body follows with a rush of vitality. That's not fantasy, it's neuroscience. Your mind tells your body, we are safe, we can move forward. Renewal is not laziness. One of the most misunderstood aspects of optimism is rest. True optimists are not endlessly energetic robots, they renew themselves often. McGuinness writes, optimists allow regular renewal, they step away before they burn out. They rest not because they're weak, but because they want to stay strong. Think of nature. Every winter, trees look dead, but they're quietly gathering energy for spring. In the same way, people who pause to breathe, walk, pray, or reflect are not wasting time. They're recharging for their next challenge. Energy needs direction. Energy without purpose is chaos. That's why McGuinness insists that motivation must always be connected to meaning. When you don't know why you're working, every effort feels heavy. But when your goal serves something bigger than comfort, growth, love, contribution, you tap into a deeper current that doesn't run out. He tells the story of a man who survived years in a prison camp because he repeated one sentence every morning, I must stay alive so I can see my daughter again. That small, clear purpose kept his spirit alive when everything else was gone. Action fuels emotion. McGuinness argues that energy doesn't appear out of thin air. It's created by movement. When you act, your mood follows. He calls this the physics of motivation. Action doesn't wait for energy, it creates it. Depressed people often wait to feel better before they move. Optimists move first, and that movement makes them feel better. Even the smallest step, cleaning a desk, taking a walk, making a call, can restart the emotional engine. Motion awakens momentum. Managing emotional energy. McGuinness also emphasizes emotional boundaries. Optimists know when to walk away from negativity. They don't let other people's chaos drain their spirit. They learn to say no without guilt, because saying yes to everything means saying no to your own peace. Energy is limited. Protect it like gold. The cycle of energy. He outlines a simple but powerful loop. Thought, you choose what to believe. Emotion, belief shapes feeling. Action, feeling shapes behavior. Result, behavior shapes outcome. Reinforcement, outcome strengthens belief, and the cycle repeats, positively or negatively, depending on your starting thought. Optimists start that cycle intentionally. They choose thoughts that give power instead of fear. Real energy comes from alignment. Finally, McGuinness reminds us that motivation doesn't come from hype or self-talk alone. It comes from alignment. When your values, goals, and daily actions match, you stop fighting yourself. That inner harmony is pure energy. Optimists don't chase excitement, they build sustainable enthusiasm. He ends the chapter with a simple truth. You don't wait to feel alive, you live, and the feeling follows. Optimism doesn't just brighten your mind, it charges your life. Changing thought patterns. Your life follows your thoughts. Every emotion, every action, every belief starts in the mind. So if you want to change your life, you must first change your thinking. Alan Loy McGuinness says pessimism isn't just a bad mood, it's a mental habit. People train themselves often unconsciously to expect the worst. But the good news is, habits can be unlearned. The mind is a filter. McGuinness explains that the brain works like a filter. Out of thousands of daily experiences, your mind selects what to notice and what to ignore. If that filter is tuned to negativity, you'll find proof that life is unfair everywhere you look. If it's tuned to possibility, you'll start spotting opportunities that others miss. This doesn't mean lying to yourself. It means adjusting your mental focus from why me to what can I do now. Thoughts create feelings. Many people believe feelings come first and thoughts follow. In reality, it's the other way around. What you think determines how you feel. Tell yourself I'm trapped, and your body collapses. Tell yourself I'm learning, and your body mobilizes energy. McGinnis calls this the psychology of direction. You may not control the wind, but you can adjust your sails, and your thoughts are those sails. How to change negative thinking. Catch the thought. Awareness is the first step. Don't fight the thought. Notice it. Example, I always fail. Question its truth. Is it really always? Or are you focusing only on the times you failed? Replace it with something constructive. Example, sometimes I struggle, but I've learned from it before. I can again. McGinnis reminds us that this is not positive thinking in the shallow sense. It's accurate thinking, realistic, balanced, and empowering. The principle of substitution. You can't simply delete a thought. Your mind needs something to replace it. If you try not to think about fear, you'll think about fear even more. So instead, think about courage, purpose, or gratitude. Nature abhors a vacuum, so fill your mental space with what you want to grow. The power of inner dialogue. McGinnis warns that the way you talk to yourself shapes your emotional world. Many people speak to themselves in ways they'd never speak to a friend. They say, "You're useless, you'll never change, you're too late." He suggests practicing gentler, wiser self-talk, the voice of a supportive mentor instead of a harsh critic. Your inner voice should be a coach, not a bully. From catastrophe to challenge, optimists mentally reframe situations. Where a pessimist sees disaster, they see challenge. Instead of "this is the end," they think "this is the beginning of something else." This mental shift changes physiology, heart rate, focus, resilience. It turns panic into problem solving. Guard your mental input. Just as your diet affects your body, your information diet affects your mind. McGinnis urges readers to be careful about what they read, watch, and discuss. If you consume constant negativity, fear-based news, gossip, or complaints, you're feeding your inner pessimist. Optimists protect their mental space as carefully as their health. The gratitude lens. One of the most powerful tools for rewiring thought patterns is gratitude. When you consciously notice what's working, your brain learns to search for more of it. This doesn't erase problems, it gives you strength to face them. McGinnis says, gratitude doesn't make life perfect, it makes it livable. Patience in reprogramming. Changing thought patterns takes time. Negative thinking is like an old trail in the forest, well-worn and automatic. You must walk the new path repeatedly until it becomes the easier route. Each time you choose a hopeful perspective, you carve a new neural path. Do it long enough, and optimism becomes your brain's default mode. McGinnis closes this section with a powerful reminder. You can't always change your circumstances, but you can always change the story you tell yourself about them. Your story becomes your reality, so tell one that keeps you moving forward. The power of imagination and visualization. Before every achievement, before every discovery, before every dream that became real, there was an image in someone's mind. Alan Loy McGinnis reminds us, what you can see in your imagination, you can begin to build in your life. Optimists don't just hope for good outcomes, they visualize them. They create a mental picture of success so vivid that it pulls them forward, even when the road feels impossible. Imagination as a blueprint. McGinnis compares imagination to an architect's plan. No building starts with bricks, it starts with vision. Likewise, every personal breakthrough begins in the invisible space of thought. He writes, optimists rehearse success before it happens. They live it in their minds until their hearts believe it's possible. When you imagine clearly, not just the goal, but the feeling of reaching it, your brain begins working toward it subconsciously. This is not magic, it's psychology. Your mind starts spotting clues, opportunities, and paths that align with the image you've created. Why visualization works. Modern neuroscience confirms what McGinnis intuited decades ago. Your brain can't fully distinguish between real experience and vividly imagined experience. Athletes who mentally practice a skill, like shooting free throws or running laps, show the same brain activity as those who physically do it. That means imagination literally builds muscle memory for success. Optimists use this principle in everyday life. They picture calm before a meeting, strength before a challenge, peace before sleep. Visualization, practiced consistently, programs the mind for composure and confidence. Stories of visionary optimists. McGinnis shares the story of Thomas Edison, who endured thousands of failed experiments while inventing the light bulb. Edison wasn't blindly stubborn. He saw the light long before it existed. He said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That vision sustained him through failure after failure until success finally caught up with his imagination. He also mentions Winston Churchill, who in Britain's darkest hour pictured victory when others only saw defeat. That inner picture, "we shall never surrender," became a national identity. The role of hopeful fantasy. McGinnis makes an interesting point. Children are natural optimists because they imagine freely. They dream of being heroes, explorers, creators. Adults, trained by disappointment, often stop dreaming, and with that, their energy fades. He says that reviving healthy imagination is key to staying young in spirit. Imagination keeps the heart alive and the mind creative. Practical visualization steps. Define a clear image. Be specific. Not "I want success," but "I see myself confidently presenting my ideas." Add emotion. Feel what success would feel like: relief, pride, calm, gratitude. Emotion is the glue that makes imagination stick. Repeat daily. The mind learns through repetition. The more you see it, the more real it becomes. Act in alignment. Visualization without action is daydreaming. Action gives the image substance. Imagination versus illusion. McGinnis warns that visualization must stay realistic. Pretending that everything will magically work out is not optimism, it's denial. Real optimism says, "This will be hard, but I can see myself getting through it." That difference separates dreamers from doers. Vision fuels purpose. When you lose your sense of direction, life feels heavy. But when you can see where you're going, even faintly, your steps regain rhythm. Vision gives suffering meaning. That's why optimists return to imagination when life gets hard. It reminds them that today's struggle can be part of tomorrow's story. McGinnis ends this section with a line that feels almost like a prayer. Hold a picture of your best self in your mind, and one day you'll grow into it. Most people spend their lives chasing happiness, yet few ever truly find it. Alan Loy McGinnis explains why. Happiness depends on what happens to you, but joy depends on what lives within you. Happiness is an emotion. Joy is a state of being. Happiness fades when circumstances change. Joy remains steady even in the middle of pain. Optimists know how to cultivate both, but they never confuse the two. The fragility of happiness. Happiness is fragile because it's conditional. We feel it when things go our way, when we're loved, when we win, when we're comfortable. But the moment life turns difficult, happiness slips away like smoke. McGinnis says happiness is like sunshine, beautiful but temporary, and no one can live in sunlight forever. The goal, therefore, is not constant happiness, but inner weather resistance. Optimists accept that sadness, frustration, and loss are part of the human experience. They don't panic when happiness disappears. They trust it will return, just like the sun after a storm. The strength of joy. Joy, however, is deeper. It's not built on pleasure or comfort, but on meaning and connection. McGinnis describes joy as a quiet gladness that grows from gratitude and love. You can feel joy even when you're tired, grieving, or uncertain, because joy doesn't depend on perfect conditions. It depends on perspective. He writes, "Happiness is often found in laughter. Joy is found in peace. Joy is knowing that even when everything changes, you are still anchored in something that can't be taken away. Your values, your faith, your purpose, your capacity to love." The paradox, joy and sorrow. One of McGinnis's most touching insights is that joy and sorrow can exist together. In fact, he says people who've known deep pain often experience the richest joy because they've learned how fragile and precious life is. He shares stories of patients who, after great loss, discovered a kind of calm they never knew before. They said things like, "I'm not happy, but I feel at peace." That peace, McGinnis explains, is joy, the kind that pain cannot destroy. Choosing daily joy doesn't happen automatically. It's a daily choice, a discipline of gratitude. It begins the moment you stop asking, "Why don't I have more?" and start asking, "What can I appreciate right now?" McGinnis suggests practical ways to practice joy. Begin each day with thanks, even for small things, a warm drink, a new morning, a kind word. Celebrate small victories. Joy grows when you acknowledge progress, not perfection. Surround yourself with hopeful people. Joy is contagious, so is cynicism. Choose your company wisely. Serve others. The surest way to feel joy is to give it away. Happiness is fleeting, joy is renewable. McGinnis uses a beautiful metaphor. Happiness is a spark, joy is a flame. A spark excites you, but a flame warms you through the night. Joy doesn't burn out when you lose something, because it's not about having, it's about being. And here lies the heart of optimism. Optimists know they won't always be happy, but they can always return to joy. Living from the inside out. McGinnis closes the chapter with this reminder. You cannot control the world outside, but you can cultivate peace inside. When joy becomes your inner atmosphere, external weather can't shake you. You carry your own sunlight. That's why the happiest people aren't those who have the most. They're the ones who have learned to find joy even when they have the least. Love and emotional optimism. If optimism is the fuel of the mind, love is the warmth of the heart that keeps it burning. Alan Loy McGinnis believed that optimism and love are inseparable because to stay hopeful, you must stay connected. People who give and receive love develop emotional resilience. They recover faster from setbacks, forgive more easily, and keep faith in the goodness of life. As McGinnis puts it, love feeds optimism, isolation drains it. Love as an energy source. Love isn't just romance, it's the deep sense of belonging that reminds you matter to someone. When people know they're valued, they gain strength to face anything. McGinnis writes that love literally renews energy. Caring relationships reduce stress hormones and increase serotonin, the body's happiness chemical. That's why being with people who genuinely care for you can make you feel physically lighter, calmer, and more alive. Love gives the spirit somewhere to rest. Why optimists love differently? Optimists approach relationships with curiosity instead of fear. They expect good intentions, not betrayal. They understand that no connection is perfect, but they believe it's worth nurturing anyway. Where pessimists say, people always let me down, optimists say, sometimes people fail, but love is still worth the risk. That simple belief changes how they listen, forgive, and stay open. The courage to be vulnerable. McGinnis emphasizes that love requires courage, because loving means exposing your heart. Many people, after being hurt, decide never to trust again. They think this will protect them from pain, but it only protects them from joy. Optimists choose differently. They know vulnerability can wound, but it can also heal. As he writes, to close your heart is to survive, to open it is to live. Love in everyday life. Love doesn't have to be dramatic. It's found in small gestures, listening without judgment, writing a kind message, forgiving someone who didn't even ask. Optimists see these as investments in the emotional fabric of life. McGinnis observed that people who give affection freely rarely stay depressed for long. The act of caring itself becomes medicine. Even smiling at a stranger, helping a friend move, or saying thank you keeps your emotional world alive and hopeful. Love in motion is optimism in action. When love is tested. But what about heartbreak? What about betrayal, loss, or grief? McGinnis doesn't sugarcoat this. He admits that love can wound deeply, but he insists the answer is not to retreat, but to heal through love. He shares the story of couples who survived tragedy not by avoiding their pain, but by facing it together. Their secret wasn't perfection, it was persistence. They held each other through darkness, believing light would return. That belief is optimism, love's strongest form. Love expands capacity. Optimists often seem to have endless emotional space. They can forgive more, support more, and stay patient longer. McGinnis explains this isn't magic, it's training. Every act of love expands the heart's capacity, just like exercise strengthens a muscle. The more you give, the more you can give. He calls this the law of inner abundance. Love doesn't empty you, it stretches you. A universal principle. Love and optimism are mirrors. Love says people are worth believing in. Optimism says life is worth believing in. Both are declarations of faith. In humanity, in goodness, in the possibility of redemption. That's why the most hopeful people are also the most loving. They keep their hearts open, even after being broken, not because they forget the pain, but because they know joy is waiting on the other side of it. McGinnis ends the chapter with one of his most beautiful lines. The pessimist builds walls, the optimist builds bridges. Love, he says, is the bridge. It connects you to others, to hope, and ultimately to life itself. Dealing with negativity and conflict. No matter how kind or calm you are, negativity will always find a way to knock on your door. People will criticize, misunderstand, or bring their own pain into your space. Alan Loy McGuinness says the key isn't to avoid negativity, it's to learn how to disarm it without losing your peace. Optimists don't run from conflict, they face it, but with grace, not aggression. They understand that the goal of every disagreement isn't to win, but to heal. Understanding the source of negativity. McGuinness reminds us that most negative people aren't evil, they're hurting. Cynicism often grows from disappointment. Anger is sometimes fear in disguise. When someone lashes out, the optimist doesn't instantly react. They pause and think, this attack might not be about me. That space, that pause, is where peace begins. He writes, you can't stop others from throwing stones, but you can decide not to pick them up and throw them back. The 3 kinds of negative people. The chronic complainer drains energy by always focusing on what's wrong. The critic sees flaws in everyone but never offers help. The victim believes the world owes them something and refuses responsibility. McGuinness doesn't suggest cutting everyone off, but he does suggest boundaries. You can listen without absorbing, you can care without carrying. Emotional immunity. Just like the body can build immunity to illness, your mind can build immunity to negativity. Each time you refuse to mirror someone's hostility, your inner peace grows stronger. Optimists protect their emotional state by choosing their responses consciously. They don't let others dictate their mood. They remember, you can't control someone's attitude, but you can control your atmosphere. How to diffuse conflict. McGuinness outlines a few practical steps for managing disagreements effectively. Stay calm. Anger fuels anger. A soft tone disarms tension faster than shouting ever could. Listen actively. People often calm down when they feel heard. Sometimes the argument isn't about the issue, it's about being acknowledged. Separate people from problems. Attack the issue, not the person. Respect opens the door for resolution. Look for shared goals. Ask, what do we both want here? It shifts focus from fighting to cooperating. Know when to walk away. Some people want battles, not solutions. Peace sometimes means silence. Refusing the gift of anger. There's a story McGuinness shares. A monk was once insulted by a stranger. Instead of replying, he smiled. When asked why, the monk said, if someone offers you a gift and you don't take it, to whom does it belong? The gift, of course, stays with the giver. So does anger. You don't have to accept every emotional package that's thrown your way. Self-reflection. Am I the negative one? McGuinness gently challenges the reader to ask, do I ever drain others? Optimism begins with honesty. If you find yourself complaining constantly, it's a sign your energy is leaking and needs renewal. Try replacing complaints with gratitude and gossip with encouragement. That single shift can transform not only your relationships, but your entire emotional climate, turning conflict into connection. Handled wisely, conflict can actually deepen relationships. When 2 people fight fair, with respect and openness, they build trust. They prove that love and honesty can coexist. McGuinness compares it to blacksmithing. Metal is strengthened by fire and hammer. Likewise, character is forged through friction. The higher choice. In every argument, you have 2 options, to defend your ego or to protect the relationship. Optimists choose the second. They understand that being kind is often more powerful than being right. McGuinness sums it up beautifully. Optimism doesn't deny conflict, it transforms it from a battlefield into a classroom. When you stop seeing negativity as an attack and start seeing it as a test of your peace, you regain control. And that calm, steady heart is the truest proof of optimism. Acceptance and letting go. At some point, every person faces a truth they wish they could change. A loss, a failure, a mistake, a goodbye. Optimism, Alan Loy McGuinness reminds us, isn't the power to fix everything. It's the wisdom to accept what cannot be fixed and still move forward with peace. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing freedom over resistance. It means saying, I will no longer let what I can't change control what I can. The healing power of acceptance. McGuinness explains that acceptance is one of the hardest yet most liberating acts in life. When people fight against reality, when they cling to how things should be, they suffer twice. Once from the event itself and again from their refusal to accept it. Acceptance doesn't erase pain, but it removes the poison of denial. It allows healing to begin. He writes, "You can't sail forward while clinging to the dock. Until you release what's gone, your hands can't grasp what's next." Letting go of control. Many people mistake control for strength. They believe that holding on tightly will protect them from loss. But McGinnis argues that true strength lies in flexibility. He uses the metaphor of trees in a storm. The rigid ones snap, the flexible ones bend and survive. Optimists learn to adapt, to let life flow. They trust that some endings are not punishments but preparation. That even in loss, something sacred is forming. The gift of grief. McGinnis treats grief not as an enemy, but as a teacher. He says the depth of our sorrow reveals the depth of our love, and that pain, if faced with honesty, can purify the heart. He tells of a woman who lost her son and said, "I don't know how to live with this." McGinnis didn't try to explain her suffering away. He simply said, "Then don't try to live without it. Live with it, gently." Over time, she found peace, not by forgetting, but by remembering differently. That's what acceptance is. Not erasing memory, but softening it until it no longer hardens your heart. Forgiving life acceptance also means forgiving, not just others, but life itself. When you stop asking why me and start asking what now, you shift from resentment to readiness. Forgiveness is the bridge between the past and the future. It's how you reclaim your energy from what's over and reinvest it in what's ahead. McGinnis writes, "Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is remembering without bitterness." Surrender without defeat. Letting go isn't passive. It's an active form of trust. It's the decision to stop forcing what won't move and start flowing toward what will. McGinnis often quoted Reinhold Niebuhr's famous serenity prayer. "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." This balance between effort and surrender defines mature optimism. It's not all fight nor all faith, but a dance between the two. Learning the art of release. McGinnis gives practical advice for letting go. Name what you're holding. You can't release what you won't admit. Feel it fully. Pain denied is pain prolonged. Thank it for what it taught you. Even endings hold lessons. Create space for what's next. Every release is a preparation for renewal. The freedom after letting go, after release, comes relief. Not because the past disappears, but because its weight lifts. You no longer fight with ghosts. You stand lighter, clearer, more open to possibility. McGinnis writes, "Optimists don't forget the past. They bless it and then move on. That's why they seem at peace, even after heartbreak. They've learned the sacred rhythm of holding on when it's time and letting go when it's time." The final stage, trust. At the deepest level, letting go is about trust. In life, in time, in something greater than yourself. When you stop gripping what's gone, you make space for what's coming. And often, what comes next is far better than what you were afraid to lose. McGinnis closes this part with one of his most profound lines. "Faith is not believing that life will give you what you want. It's believing that life will give you what you need to grow." Transformation and growth. Every person encounters moments that divide life into before and after. A loss, a crisis, a failure, something that forces you to change. Alan Loy McGinnis calls these moments turning points of the soul. They are the crossroads where despair can destroy you or where growth can begin. Optimism, he explains, is not the denial of pain. It's the belief that pain itself can become the soil for transformation. Suffering doesn't have to make you bitter, it can make you wise. Growth begins in discomfort. McGinnis points out that comfort rarely produces growth. The moments that change us most are usually the ones we would never have chosen. He compares human growth to muscle growth. It requires resistance. When life stretches you, it's not punishment, it's preparation. Optimists understand this instinctively. They ask, "What is this teaching me?" instead of "Why is this happening?" Even pain can have purpose if you let it shape you instead of shatter you. Reframing failure. Failure, in McGinnis's view, is one of life's most effective teachers, if you're willing to listen. He writes that optimists don't label themselves by their failures. They learn from them. Each setback becomes feedback, not final judgment. He quotes psychologist William James, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that a human being can alter his life by altering his attitudes." When you interpret failure differently, you turn defeat into instruction. You stop asking, what went wrong, and start asking, what can I try next? The transformation process. McGinnis describes growth as a natural step-by-step process. Shock. Something unexpected happens. Loss, change, or disappointment. Resistance. You fight it, wanting life to go back to how it was. Surrender. You realize you can't control it and you stop struggling. Meaning. You begin to see what the experience is teaching you. Renewal. You re-enter life stronger, softer, and wiser than before. He emphasizes that transformation is not a single event. It's a gradual unfolding. You don't get over pain, you grow through it. Resilience as a choice. The difference between those who grow and those who break is choice. Two people can face the same storm. One collapses, the other rebuilds. The second person doesn't suffer less. They simply decide to keep learning. McGinnis writes, pain is inevitable. Growth is optional. Optimists choose growth again and again, finding meaning in suffering. He draws inspiration from Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, who wrote, "When we can no longer change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That's the essence of transformation. You stop asking life to be easier and start asking yourself to be stronger, kinder, and more awake. Meaning turns suffering into strength. Without meaning, pain feels pointless. With meaning, pain becomes a doorway to depth. The fire that refines. McGinnis uses the image of gold being purified by fire. Heat doesn't destroy the gold, it burns away the impurities. In the same way, life's trials reveal what's real and valuable within us. He writes, hardship doesn't just test character, it creates it. Optimists don't seek pain, but when it comes, they use it. They let it carve away pride, fear, and ego until something authentic emerges. Becoming a light for others. Growth doesn't end with personal healing. It naturally expands outward. Those who have transformed their pain into wisdom often become guides for others. McGinnis shares that some of the most compassionate people he's met were those who once suffered deeply. They understand sorrow, so they carry empathy instead of judgment. Their strength doesn't shout, it radiates quietly. He says, people who have suffered and grown become safe harbors for the hurting. The ever-continuing journey transformation isn't a single victory, it's a lifelong journey of renewal. There will always be new challenges, new losses, new beginnings. But once you've learned that growth is possible, fear loses its grip. Optimists don't say, one day I'll have peace. They say, today I'll keep growing toward it. The final message. McGinnis closes the power of optimism with a gentle but powerful truth. Optimism is not a guarantee of an easy life. It's the assurance that life, even in its hardest moments, is still worth living. To live optimistically is to walk through darkness, believing light still exists, to face endings, believing they hide new beginnings, and to keep loving, even when love has hurt before. Because in the end, optimism isn't just a mindset, it's an act of faith, a declaration that life is good and becoming better because you choose to see it that way.